Next, we have the Laurel Award for the screen. Now, this award is the same as the other one, except it's for movies. Presenting this award is Mr. Billy Crystal. Wow. He's here? Oh, yes, ma'am, he's here. You do know you're not in your house, right? Now, obviously, this is a guy who's done an awards show or two of his own, and he wants us to know that our little WGA ceremony is just the cutest fucking thing ever. Ladies and gentlemen, a legend and an icon, and a man so famous around the world, the Germans even named a night in his honor, Mr. Billy Crystal.
Still wow? If anyone knows the curling final of Please Don't Tell Me I'm TiVoing. Barry Levinson's movies all have one thing in common. I'm not in any of them. So when Barry called and asked me to present him the Laurel Award for screenwriting, I immediately said yes, because it would mean I've now done one more thing for him than he has ever done for me. This whole night is actually very awkward for me because I've never been in one of his movies. I'm a fan of most of them. And William Goldman won this award. I could have presented it to him. I was Miracle Max in his Princess Bride. I've seen worse. Woody Allen won this award. I could have presented to Woody. I was opposite him in Deconstructing Harry. The first Laurel Award went to Sonia Levian, who I could have presented to. She wrote 72 movies and the same number of casting times as Barry Levinson, none. Instead, Barry asked me to present him this award. Why not ask, like, Warren Beatty? He was Bugsy, which was when Warren slept with woman number 12,775. Could have asked Richard Dreyfuss or Danny DeVito. They were in Tin Men. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson asked me to do a cameo in Tooth Fairy. Makes more sense for me to present him with an award. Barry and I are very good friends, and he's a lovely dinner companion, but would it have hurt to have written just one thing for me? And I can never figure out why. When he was putting Diner together, he said to me, Billy, I just don't think you're right for a Jewish guy who grew up in the 50s. We're going with a different kind of Jew named Mickey Rourke. But it's not just Diner that he left me out of. Some of his greatest films, the so-called Baltimore movies, Tin Men, Avalon, Liberty Heights, they're all ones that he's written specifically with me not in mind. And in Avalon, there was another, is Aidan Quinn Jewish? That threw me. Black, Irish, blue eyes, a Jew, Aidan Quinn. When I think of breaking the fast, I want to go to Aidan Quinn's house. You cut the mutton? You cut the mutton? But it's fair because, again, I only saw 2 of the Baltimore movies, but to his credit, my friends say that they're actually pretty good. Now, what is Barry Levinson's obsession with Baltimore? Everything is about Baltimore. Baltimore this, have any of you been to Baltimore? Ooh. It's like if you like Baltimore, you'll hate Paris. But everything is Baltimore this, Baltimore that. It's infused his work. Everything is about Baltimore. What if Barry wrote the classics? Like if Barry wrote Casablanca, Bogart and Bergman on the runway at BWI Airport as she catches a flight to Annapolis. Here's looking at you, Cal Ripken Jr. I mean, if you wrote Citizen Kane, Orson Welles' dying whisper would have been crab cakes. Though I actually have been in something that Barry directed, which I want to show you. It was not one of his major works, but we had a lot of fun. It was a PSA for New York City right after 9/11, trying to get tourists to come back to New York City. I did it with Robert De Niro. Here, take a look. We completely improvised that. Barry didn't write a word of that except for what Giuliani said at the end. And now I get it, the man is brilliant. He's a brilliant writer, but did he really need to take a credit for Silent Movie? Nobody said a word. This is like Toyota taking credit because their cars go faster because they don't have any brakes. And tonight you're telling me that he deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award for his body of work. Well, it's just not me who is bitter, Barry. There are actually thousands of us who feel the exact same way. All of us wishing that this wonderful 3-time Academy Award-nominated screenplay writer will someday craft one of those great parts for us. Now, let me introduce an actor who has been in many of Barry's movies. He's an Academy Award nominee for Good Morning Vietnam. He's in Australia. Was Robin Williams, and then a tribute, Barry, from your longtime producing partner, Tom Fontana. Watch the screens.
Barry, good day. That's right, I'm down under here in Australia. I just want to congratulate you on your Writers Guild Award, as we call it, a WGAW. That's a Laurel Award, right? For a lifetime of achievement. Oh, you've done some great movies, Barry. Some of the movies are different down here. You know, Tin Man's called Copper Bloke and Avalon's called Adelaide. But they still love you down here, mate. So congratulations. In an old Aboriginal way, I'd like to say Mazel Tov. Good luck on you. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Take care.
Barry, I am thrilled that you are being honored by the Writers Guild West for your contribution to American screenwriting. I know that you've won a lot of awards, and I hope that, I know that this one will have a really great place on your mantle. And come back to New York, we got work to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Laurel Award winner for screenwriting, Barry Levinson.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not, it's right, I have to mention that in terms of Billy that he's right, I've never used him in a movie, but what he forgot to mention is that he has written a number of movies and never once asked me to direct. So that's a friendship. That's a friendship. I don't, since John Wells called me and told me about this, I've been thrilled to death about it, and at the same time petrified at the fact that I would actually have to get up here and say something. So many other people, Larry David was up here, he was terrific, he could get up and talk and do that. I will try to muddle my way through this, and bear with me. I think it's why it's so difficult is because you spend so much of your life as a writer being rejected, that when you actually have any kind of praise, it's very difficult to conjure up things because rejection is overwhelming. Somebody there knows what I'm talking about, I guess. Mel Brooks described it best to me when he said, when you go to see a movie of yours and you're there at a preview and there are people waiting to, you know, give their opinions on it, and you watch your movie, you have a barometer and you're going, good, good, you're out of the business. Good, good, you're out of the business. And that's the way you sort of feel as a writer all the time. You're in the business and you're out of the business. My father never understood that I had an interest in writing, and he had an appliance store, and he really couldn't relate to writing at all. And he, one day I came back to visit. I hadn't sold anything. I had written a bunch of things. And so he was there with his friends at a table, and he said, so how's it going? I said, well, you know, I'm writing, but I haven't sold anything. And he took a beat and he said, well, at least you have inventory. And he actually said, Sidney, the boys got inventory. Good, good, that's terrific, terrific. I'm sure a bunch of your writers out here know what it's like to finally go for the first time to meet a producer. And I wrote a screenplay, and I went to meet this producer. I didn't have an agent at the time, and through some friends I got to see him. He was not high in the food chain. He had a place off of Hollywood Boulevard. And I go to see him, and he read the screenplay. It's the first time any producer read anything that I wrote. And he said, I think this is terrific, this is good, it's 70% there. He says, 70%, we go back, rewrite, fix the 30%, we got ourselves a movie, so go write it. I said, well, what am I going to rewrite? He says, rewrite the 30% that doesn't work. I said, well, what is that 30%? He said, well, you're the writer, you fix it, go back and do that. I said, well, I may go back and start rewriting, and I may end up rewriting part of the 70%, and not touch the 30%. And he said, well, why would you do that? I said, because I don't know the difference. He says, you don't know the difference between the 70% that's good and the 30% that's not good? I said, no. He said, I thought you were a writer. I said, if I were a writer and I knew that 30% was not good, I never would have written it. And he said, what do you want me to do? I said, give me an idea. What's the 30% that doesn't work? He said, oh, now you want me to be the writer. Oh, God, it's true. When I got my first job that was really sort of successful was doing the Carol Burnett show, and which was a great show. And the first episode aired, and I called home. My grandmother got on the phone. I said, you see the Carol Burnett show? She says, oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful, the singing, the dancing. I said, well, you know, I don't do that. I just do the comedy. She said, the comedy I can do without, but the singing and the dancing. It is difficult to do movies that are semi-autobiographical because it's sort of confusing to friends and family because they can't separate one from the other. And my father was asking me about Avalon. He said, so what's it going to be about? I said, well, it has a lot to do with the appliance business, the extended family, the rise of television. He said, oh, yeah, I'd like to read that. I'd like to read that. I said, really? You never like to read the screenplays? Well, this one I'll read. And about a week later, I said, did you read the screenplay? He said, I got about halfway through it. It's not for me. I said, well, what did you do with it? He said, well, I gave it to your mother. So I went to my mother. I said, Ma, did you read the screenplay? She said, I can't get through that. It's the 20s, it's the 60s, it goes back to the 30s. Can't you click one time and just stay there? I said, well, you know, it moves around. She said, no, don't tell me anymore. I'll wait to see it in the movie theater. They couldn't separate one thing from another. And finally, there's a scene that I always remember there's a funeral sequence, and my grandmother's name was Eva Kaczynski, and there's a funeral sequence where they're burying Eva. And there were a lot of extras, and my in-laws, not in-laws, relatives that were there. And I'm trying to explain the sequence, and it's a little of an awkward, tense moment, and suddenly one of the relatives yelled out, we know what to do. It's the second time we've been to her funeral. I just want to say, in this business, you do need help along the way, and I have to single out Mel Brooks, because not only did I have an opportunity to write with him, on two films, but the great part is that he included was Ron Clark and Rudy DeLuca, and we not only were the writers, but we were there doing pre-production. We were there all during the shooting of it. We were there in the editing process, post-production process on two films, which was one of the great experiences of my life. It was like basically going to Mel Brooks University. It was an incredibly exciting time from an incredibly generous individual and a great working relationship. And I have to mention Patty Chayefsky in this regard, because through the years people have asked me, who influenced you in terms of writing? And I've always said, well, there are a bunch of different writers. But about 5-6 years ago, I was flipping channels, and Marty was on the TV show. Not the TV show, but the teleplay, the one that was made before it became a feature. And I was sitting there, I was watching it, and I remembered as a little kid sitting in front of that television set. And there was a moment when one guy says, what do you want to do tonight, Marty? I don't know, Angie, what do you want to do? And as a kid, I was mesmerized by those lines. There was something about the simplicity. It said so much. I didn't really think of it in those terms back then. But it obviously stayed with me. And then all of a sudden, when I was watching that show a few years ago, and I went, oh my God, that is the genesis of Diner. That's that natural kind of dialogue that's simple, that somehow in this very almost inarticulate manner, it expresses relationships and behavior. And so I think in some ways, all of us are influenced by those who've gone before us, whether we're conscious of it or we're not. And we build on that. We build on those writers who were so influential that somehow some of that seeps into our heads. And it's great to be here because here are writers from all over the country with all these different backgrounds. And the one thing we have in common is this passion to tell stories. I am a storyteller. I'm very pleased to be here in this room with other storytellers. I thank you for this honor.